Welcome to this panel number 8 in the conference of the Yonsei Institute for North Korean Studies. We are here today to discuss questions of engagement from the point of view of NGO and private organization versus government, so-called practical experience of working level cooperation with DPRK. And we are very happy to have two panelists plus me here for our presentation, namely Ms. Zoe Stevens, who worked a long time for Korean Tours, which was that travel agency which brought the largest number of Western foreigners to North Korea, and had decades of experience in bringing them there. Then to my left, Mr. Boljkovac, who works at Singapore University, who works since decades with states in Northeast Asia, including North Korea, South Korea, Mongolia, China, on hazardous chemical and hazardous waste management. So in the UN system, it came from Geneva for this. And finally, I am Berhard of Roundtable Foundation. We have a program in North Korea since 2003.
Cool. Okay, thank you very much for the introduction, and thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to be here with you guys, part of this roundtable discussion, this very interesting one. So as you just mentioned, we were actually, we have some questions to answer and stuff like that. I basically based my presentation on these questions, so I guess I'll just spend the next 10 minutes or so kind of talking through these questions, through my experiences of working in North Korea tourism, and then hopefully we can have a discussion to all talk about these questions and have various answers and stuff like that. So just as, there we go, you should be able to see it now. Just as an introduction, so my name is Zoe, and I've been working in North Korea tourism since 2018. I used to work for Young Pioneer Tours, and now I work for Koryo Tours. I do technically still work for them, but it's one of those cases. North Korea has not been open since January 2020, as I'm sure you are all aware. So it's yeah, I'm just waiting for the borders to open, and then I hope to return back into North Korea tourism. During that time of COVID, I then went back to university where I did an MA and MSc, and then now I'm doing my PhD in Taiwan, where I am currently at National Chung Kung University. So firstly, the first question that we kind of wanted to go through was, how would you describe your feelings about your experience cooperating with the DPRK? And just as a warning, there are some kind of casual photos here that I have taken of me in North Korea over the years, and that's because I kind of like to show this more human side of North Korea. I actually have my own social media channels as well, where I attempt to kind of expand the narrative on North Korea. So firstly, my main thing that I want to say about this is that it's never ending learning. You feel that usually when you work in a job, the more you do it and the longer you do it for, then the easier it gets, or, you have at least some questions answered. But for me, the more I work in North Korea, the more times I go, the more questions that I am left with, and often they remain unanswered or lead to further questions. So, and I think most of that is from trying to cooperate with the Koreans and trying to work with them. You're constantly learning a new level of things as the trust builds up as well. There just seems to be more and more levels that you need to kind of tackle as you're going through the motions. The second one, how do you build and maintain good working relations with the DPRK? So for me, this is all about two main things. So that would be respect and trust. And trust is a really tricky one in the DPRK because, they can't trust each other, let alone a random foreigner coming in. So I guess the best that you can do there is to take away any elements of mistrust as much as possible. So don't give them any reason for you to mistrust you. For me personally, I try and be as open with them as possible. And I feel that, you know, on a working level with them, at least, they can trust me to an extent at which is needed on a working level. And secondly is respect. I think it's really important, and I always tell travelers going into North Korea that, you know, it's a rule actually that you have to respect their country and their you know, their leaders when you go there, and that's when you're working there too. It's about you know, accepting them and not pushing things too far, which I will talk about in a minute as well. In the industry, I think in any relations cooperating with North Korea, there should always be an element of pushing them a little bit, because if you, you know, if you don't push them, then I feel that things might not go anywhere. But you also can't push them too much. You should respect those boundaries and respect their culture and respect that things are very different. The third one. So many skeptics say that what you see and hear in the DPRK is what you're allowed to see and hear. What are your thoughts on this? I get this question a lot because, like I mentioned before, I do run social media channels that showcases, in inverted commas, the DPRK. And this is a big argument against the ethics behind what I do and the ethics behind taking people to North Korea for tourism, because people say that, you know, you are just shown what they want to show you. And for sure, yes, because you are on a tour. And when you go on a tour to any country, they are going to show you what they want to show you. Obviously, North Korea is a little bit different because they really are only going to show you what they want to show you. It's not really comparable to any other country. But for me, you can see a lot more, not necessarily see what you want to see, but you really can see a lot more than what they intend on showing you. And whether that be, for example, going to a school and, you know, you're talking with the kids and obviously they have a script to follow, or they're very, very careful about what they say to you. But you notice that, you know, a 6-year-old kid doesn't have any teeth or is not wearing shoes and stuff like that. So there's that level of things. So you are able to see the poverty, even though they do try and hide it from you. But more importantly, you can see a lot more in terms of the human aspect of things. You can really see how the North Korean people live. A lot of the time, you can, you know, join in their picnics and barbecues and have fun with them on the train, as that kind of picture shows, in and out of China. So I do think that by using your eyes and keeping an open mind, you can see a lot more than what they intend to show you. And that is both physical things and metaphorical things. The next question that I wanted to answer was, what was the most frustrating thing about cooperating with the DPRK? And I mean, for anyone who cooperates with the DPRK in any capacity, they probably understand that there are a lot of frustrating things. For me, like I mentioned before, it's always important to push the North Koreans to a certain extent, to the extent at which, you know, you're constantly in the realms of tourism, you're constantly trying to open up new areas, you're constantly trying to open up something new to see or somewhere new to go, new provinces and stuff like that. So if there were no advances in these kind of areas, then, you know, if we didn't push the North Koreans at all, we would still be stuck in Pyongyang and not be able to visit any of the other provinces. So there is a limit of being able to push them, but knowing where that limit is really difficult. And one of the biggest things for me is not knowing when no really means no. And just as a little anecdotal thing here is that one time I was trying to take in a group of Japanese friends. I have Japanese friends and they wanted to come on a tour with me with choreo tours. The Japanese tourism have a monopoly on the tourism to the DPRK. It's complicated and basically very difficult to take a full Japanese group into North Korea. And I was trying my best to negotiate this with my colleagues in Pyongyang, because I was there on a tour and I was trying to negotiate this. And I'd already done a 30-day tour. I was very, very tired. And in the end, they were like, you know, you just have to leave this. It's an absolute no from us. And I just burst into tears. It's so embarrassing, but I just burst into tears in front of my North Korean colleagues. You know, I took myself off to the bathroom, calmed myself down, came back and was like, okay. And my colleague just looked at me and was like, it's fine, you know, they can go, your Japanese friends can go. And it was really shocking. I was very frustrated. I was like, why is it now a yes? I would rather have stayed a no. It didn't make any sense. But the pictures at the bottom show me taking that Japanese group in, and then also meeting Kenji Fujimoto, who some of you might know to be the personal chef for the Kim family. He also owns a restaurant in Pyongyang. So yeah, that was good fun anyway. Next up is there a challenge to this cooperation that surprised you? It never gets easier, like I said, kind of at the start. It's a never ending learning journey. That also never gets easier in terms of trying to figure out exactly what's going on around you. And also in terms of building up relations there, you know, there are people there that, you know, now I care about. And that makes it very difficult when suddenly you have people that you care about in North Korea. So many critics of cooperation with the DPRK say that it only helps the regime. What do you think about this assertion? If so, how is it justified? If not, how did you prevent it? I have a very conflicted personal opinion on this. Again, I get it a lot because of what I do and because of how I talk about this kind of stuff on social media. For me, in terms of the tourism realm, I personally believe that it's ethical what I do because, and what the tourism industry does, because it would be detrimental to kind of isolate an already isolated regime. If there was no tourism, then you're just isolating them further. There is very little about tourism actually that helps the regime, and I can't go into details of how much money the regime make from tourism in the DPRK. But, you know, to give most people an idea, the money that goes in through tourism, that goes into any tourism business in the same way. So, you know, it goes to the to buying cars, to buying buses, to buying petrol, to stationery in the office, wages for the guides, which, you know, although very minimal, still actually do exist. So by the time it gets to the top, I can't say how much is left, but it's definitely nothing compared to all the other things that the DPRK may or may not have going on. Is there any special moment or story you'd like to share about your time cooperating with the DPRK? So I'll try and speed this one up, but basically this was my absolute favorite moment in the DPRK. This was New Year's Eve 2019 to 2020. And it is it's something that I always come back to if people ask me about a special moment. I was in the middle of the crowd with my colleagues. We'd kind of like let all the tourists just kind of go off and enjoy themselves. There's thousands and thousands of Koreans. I don't know if any of you saw these New Year's Eve celebrations, but they had the Moranbong band on as well, which is a very popular North Korean band. And I remember looking around me and seeing all of these North Koreans, these people in the picture, I have no idea who they are. They're just North Korean students. I just saw all these people around me holding up their smartphones, their balloons, stuff like that. And for me, it was, I looked around and I thought, okay, you know, this could have been anywhere in the world. This is just a normal New Year's Eve celebration. And that moment remained quite special to me. So, and I think this is the final one, but what areas do you think show potential for cooperation with the DPRK? Of course, for me, my expertise lie in tourism, so I'm going to say tourism for this one. And why do you think many state governments have gotten wrong in their attempts to cooperate with the DPRK? What's different about your organization's cooperation with the DPRK? Again, going back to the first point, kind of respect and willingness, and a lot of the time, like, is it a true willingness to cooperate? You know, from the international community, a lot of the time, you find either the DPRK don't want to cooperate, obviously, but also the international community, whoever it might be or whatever organization it might be, don't actually have the intent on cooperating, but actually just forcing their, you know, whatever they're trying to do on the DPRK. I don't think that is ideal. Where's the most room for improvement? Communications, especially in the realms of tourism. So if there was a way to be able to call up my Korean colleagues whilst I'm in the country, that would be great, because I don't know if you guys know how it works, but basically when you buy a foreign SIM card in the DPRK, one, it's extremely expensive. It costs about 60 euros just to buy the SIM card, and then you actually have to add you know, gigabytes of internet onto it. It's incredibly expensive, but the main problem is that you can't communicate with your North Korean colleagues with that SIM card. It's an international SIM card and only international people can use it. It just makes it very annoying and very slow, and especially not being able to communicate with them outside of the country as well. So, you know, improvements in their communication structures, infrastructure, which, you know, they are currently doing now, but definitely need improvement. And the value of cooperating in the DPRK, for me, it's the what else, you know. There's been a lot of, yeah, you know, what else would it be if it's not cooperation? There we go. Yeah, so thank you very much for listening, and I hope we can get a bit of a discussion going. Sorry if I was talking for so long there.
Thank you very much. It was just perfect, also in terms of time. And now we come immediately, I think, to our second intervention, and then third, and then we discuss the issue together. Please.
Thank you very much, Berhard. Can you hear me? I'm Boljkovac, and I work with the UN Center of Excellence at Tsinghua University, dealing with multilateral environmental agreements. I'm Canadian, and I live in Switzerland, actually, although my place of work is Beijing. Like Zoe, I've also been cut off from my place of work and activity for the past 2.5 years, but still been able to continue that online. I started working with DPRK back in 2003. Was the first time I met someone from DPRK, and my first visit was 2005, I believe, November. I worked for a small UN agency called UNITAR, and I just want to give a little bit of background about this because I think it hits some of the questions. The UN Institute for Training and Research, and we were one of the smallest UN agencies at the time, and still are to this day, but I left in 2012. And we had I'm deeply involved in, Berhard mentioned, in chemicals waste issues with the UN. And we had a new convention called the Stockholm Convention, where there were a list of initial list of 12 chemicals that would be basically banned globally through the convention because of the harm they cause to human health and the environment. And the convention itself entered into force in 2003, so there were enough UN member states that ratified it that it could become officially international law. And Switzerland, where I'm based, was competing with Germany, Bonn, actually, to have the home of the staff for the convention secretariat, and also for another convention called the Rotterdam Convention as well. And it was a very frustrating time because a lot of money was being spent on these campaigns, which could have been better spent on protecting the environment. But the Swiss had a very innovative approach to their campaign. The Swiss this one of the senior Swiss officials in the government called me up one day and said, "We have money for UNITAR for cooperation capacity building projects with developing countries and countries with their economies in transition for 40 countries to do action plan training on the Stockholm Convention." And we have, I think it was $80,000 per country, which is quite generous for what we were doing. We just want them two conditions. One, that they be a party to the convention, so hopefully they can vote for us, and that we approve the list in advance. And my whole international career started with negotiation of the Stockholm Convention about 7 years beforehand, and I joined the UN in the year 2000. So this was 2002 at that point. And I said, sure, we'll do that. That's fine. I cleared it. It was a little bit of a political campaign, but we were allowed to take the projects. And I checked every day. The UN has a website, even back then, 20 years ago, that was updated to the minute with countries that had ratified and become parties to conventions. So every morning I go and check the New York database when I get to the office over my coffee. And those 7 years we were negotiating that convention, I never once saw DPRK. They did not attend. You negotiate a convention, if you think of the General Assembly hall with all the countries gathered, this is exactly the same sort of format we have for these negotiations. They were never there. There was a sign for them every time, but they simply weren't present. Lo and behold, after the Swiss offered this money, I clicked on the website and there they were. They had become a party. And I thought to myself, what better opportunity for a country to benefit from training on a convention that they have no clue about because they've not been involved in this negotiation. So I added them to the list and I emailed the list. I had this list of 40 countries. And 5 minutes later, my Swiss colleague called me and said, "Craig, the list looks great, except you've got DPRK on there and they're not a party." I said, "Well, yes, they are." And then he said, "Okay, you must be in South Korea." And I said, "No, South Korea is no longer a developing country." At that point, South Korea had gone off the UNDP list, which is the main indicator of what a developing country is. Their UNDP office closed, the UN Development Program. And so I insisted, and the Swiss guy called and said, "Okay, I have to check with the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. There's an automatic 30-day delay for anything to do with North Korea. I'll let you know." I said, "Look, you've given us money for 39 countries. I can wait 30 days for 40. 30 days later, they got back. "Okay, you can go ahead." It took 3 years to get to DPRK after the money was approved. So this covers the most frustrating part of the question, especially. But I faxed at the time, mailed, did everything I could to contact DPRK to offer this project. We're offering them, money and training, and they simply did not respond. And then one day we were at a negotiation of the Rotterdam Convention, and there were 2 people from DPRK there, from the embassy, the mission in Geneva. So I walked up to them, I introduced myself to them, and they said, I explained the situation, and they said, "Craig, Mr. Craig, it's nice to meet you, but we're completely lost in this convention. We don't know anything about it. Can you help us?" So it turned out to be the deputy ambassador and the environment attaché. And so I helped them and showed them how, what the main issues were, etc. They were very grateful. And the attaché said, "Next week, can you come to our mission and explain the whole thing?" So I went, and, they have a huge chateau in Geneva on the lake. It's very luxurious, but very austere. You walk in and it's like you're in Jung. It's really in DPRK. It's quite a sight. And I went into this large meeting room. The attaché took very copious notes, and he said, "Craig, I'm going to turn this into a table, and I'm going to send it to Pyongyang and get instructions." And for the next year and a half, he called me every month, and we even started having lunches. And he said, "Mr. Craig, let's meet for lunch." And we get to lunch. No answer from Jung. But he was so competent and embarrassed and seated, and it was really this combination of it was just so normal, which also answers the question about what is it here. Some of the what surprises you the most is the normality of the people that you're working with. You hear so much in the media these people have the same hopes, dreams, etc. as us, and we became quite good friends. And it was really, really interesting anyway at the end of the day. And then finally, a year and a half later, Mr. Craig, didn't answer. You're invited to my country. And so we pulled together a delegation of 2 people to go to training. And I made an announcement at the Minotaur staff meeting. We could all fit in one room. We were such a small agency. And saying in 2 weeks, we're sending people to Pyongyang to do training on the convention. And my boss, the head of Minotaur, I had forgotten to tell him about this project. And he said, Craig, you come to my office immediately after the meeting. I thought, oh no, I'm in big trouble. I violated some UN rule or something to take this project on. So if he was an older gentleman who was retiring in a couple of years, a year, and would be anything. And 75% on the 99 other countries we were. It's not simple, it's not easy, but this goes to my feelings, number one, about working with DPRK. I have to say, I've never had a more rewarding sense of my work than working with this country. I don't know, Berhard, you might agree too, I think. Because we're sort of soulmates on working with DPRK. It's a very difficult country. We're absolutely there with our eyes open about the political situation. Yes, to some degree, some small funding may help the regime, but I sincerely and passionately believe in engagement. The more people we bring out on study tours, etc. I brought at least 5 officials out who've never left the country in their lives. And you can't believe what they see with their own eyes doesn't compare to their whole lifetime of what they hear at home. It just overwhelms them sometimes when they see the outside world. And to me, that's one of the most satisfying gifts that I felt I could ever help in a modest way to give them. And I think if you just isolate the regime fully, like many states and the UN, etc., have been doing over the years, it doesn't help anyone. It doesn't help them for when they finally, if they finally ever open up to a greater degree. It doesn't help us understand them and what their needs are as a state. And I don't think it serves well for reunification eventually either. This constant isolation to me is self-defeating. So I feel very passionate about that. What areas, I don't know how much longer I have, but I'll just do it about 1 or 2 more minutes. Yeah. Environment to me is a prime issue. And I think tourism, Zoe, you're right, and also health issues. They're not apolitical issues. Look at COP27 in Sharm el-Sheikh last week. That's as political as you can get. But you can cooperate on environment in a very non-political way with technical training, and it benefits everyone. DPRK is the last country on earth to produce 2 of the 12 chemicals that we see on this Stockholm Convention list. Before we went there, we thought the whole world had stopped producing something called PCBs, which are used as an coolant in transformers, electrical transformers. Russia stopped production in 1991. We went in 2005, and we had a meeting with the Minister of Environment, and I said in the meeting, okay, you produce DDT, we do that. That was another chemical on the list, the pesticide that's used for malaria vector control. But what else do you produce? Is there anything else? And they said, oh yeah, 2,000 tons a year of PCBs and 1,000 tons a year of another one, hexachloroben. And we were completely gobsmacked. The convention itself was written under the assumption that these chemicals were no longer produced anywhere in the world. So technically, DPRK wasn't even violating the convention because there was no language in the convention to ensure the stopping of production of these chemicals. So for people that feel isolation is a way forward, to me, that's the best possible example of why we can't isolate them. We need to engage them, and we need to help them. In their production of these chemicals evaporate and go all over the world. The highest levels of them are in Inuit people in the Arctic, thousands of kilometers away from where they're actually used. And you know, the Inuit don't have much agriculture. DDT is used in DPRK for agriculture stuff. And you can see the patterns on the way that such a scientists have done studies. The world is literally a one world place we live in. I feel absolutely passionately there. They're contributing to the problem. They're embarrassed about it. They don't have the means to get rid of the production by themselves. They need outside assistance to do it, and we have to be there. So I think I actually now I'm looking again down my list, and the only other thing I would say is the room for improvement. I really feel if governments and UN institutions and other NGOs and other actors were more open to working with DPRK. I just want to close with a quote. One of my closest officials that I work with in DPRK is the former head of the UN Affairs Office, basically in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. He's a very senior person, granted, but he said, Craig, every time I come to Geneva, everybody hates me because I have to go for human rights, and they feel stressed. They know the human rights situation is terrible. They feel absolutely powerless, even these senior officials. Changing that, but they know it. And he said, I come for human rights. Everyone hates me. Everyone judges my country. I come for disarmament. It's even worse. I come for environment. Everyone's curious about my country. Everyone welcomes us. They want to work together. They want to help. And he said, every time I come for one of your meetings and tours, it's like a breath of fresh air. And so that totally convinced me that this environment is a wedge issue where we can really make, I think, spectacular progress when the pendulum swings to the position where we can engage more openly again, more fully with DPRK. We can't now, the geopolitical situation won't allow it, but we plan now when times are bad and we try to implement when times are better. So I just like to end on that note.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Craig. That was really a good also compliment to what the students before said, because we have now also two different views: the view from a more company side and the view from a UN international organization side. And since a lot of room has already been covered here, I will just add a few more things maybe from our side. Let me start by saying that everything shocking and bizarre and sad what you hear of North Korea and read in the media, almost 90% of it is true, or even 99%. However, it's not the full truth. And that's not because the media engage in some kind of conspiracy there to degrade North Korea, but if you think, let's say, some European media, they would not report the normal thing or the everyday thing about North Korea. They pick on these things. First of all, for an intrinsic motivation, because it gives clicks or it gives views or it gives new readers, but also because that's the only thing they find interesting in that. They wouldn't report the other thing. And very often from that, we get the idea that the whole country, it's a hellhole and it's only consisting of the bizarre and the dangerous and the sad. And that's not the case. And we saw already in some examples here that there are issues and there are large areas where we have a very different view on the country and could cooperate. Now what we do is we have a political foundation, so we have a political goal, which is broadly seen as reconciliation on the Korean Peninsula or peace in Northeast Asia. That's a big word. And we have, let's say, a means to do so. That is, in our case, capacity building. We are not a humanitarian agency, and we are not a technical agency. That limits us a lot. And that's also a thing which is not very North Korean, but very important to keep in mind. Like most developing countries, North Korea likes hardware, they like computers, so they can't, but it's difficult for them to get them. We don't offer any of this, which limits us in a way. We can offer them lecturers to go there, and maybe with the lecturer goes a very small scale of, let's say, books and materials, but not much more. That is the way we work. And we started to work in 2003 and worked first on economic training, then sustainable forestry, renewable energy, organic farming, and finally biodiversity and nature protection. Plus, we have some side program on health issues, but that goes already. We started with a rather political thing, we called it even economic opening. And I remember I'm an economist myself in 2004 and 2005. We had 19% people from the central bank sitting and listening when I lectured on monetary transition in Russia and in Czechoslovakia, and that time later Czech Republic. That was very interesting for them. They were tremendously interested, asked hours of questions, and they were not prevented to do so. It was something which was at that time allowed, because there was a certain window of opportunity to talk about these things. However, when we later had a more formal program on trade capacity building and trade opening from 2006 to 2009, we had a strange situation that on the purely program level, our program was considered by us very successful, so we could do training, we could do missions to Europe, fact-finding missions, they always called it that time, and we had a lot of cooperation. But on the factual level, we had a huge trade disintegration. 2006, first nuclear test, 2009, second nuclear test, so it didn't really work. And that's why we later moved into other fields where cooperation was possible. So that's already a lesson there. Also, you have to be really flexible. And I later come to that environmental problems also, because I also strongly agree that it's important to work in these issues, because you can work in these issues. I want to take one question and turn it around. I mean, our trips to North Korea, we are neither tourists nor tourist agents. It's not so much about what we see and hear in DPRK, but for us it's also interesting what they see and hear from us. And we bring every trip until 2019, before pandemic, brought with every trip sometimes gigabytes, many gigabytes, like 10, 15, 20 of freely available, but for North Korea, unavailable information in the fields we work in, let's say on sustainable forestry, on tree nursery management, on seedling management, on certain migratory birds, or whatever, on botanical gardens, sometimes directly on their request that they said we have this or that problem, this or that area, we don't know how to go on, or sometimes just by collecting material also on all these international environmental agreements, the newsletter which you produce with your colleagues, very helpful there. And we printed some out, or we brought some messages, and people often say, well, that's official information. What can it help? But for us, it's very important to see that there is certainly a real way would say it would be good if they had more information which they are denied. Political information about other country systems, about what is going on in South Korea, about different income levels. But it's for us equally important to give them factual information which is not prevented from entering the country, because by this we think we empower our partners. Our partners are now, since quite some time, 2014, it's the Ministry of Land and Environment Protection, the one in Posong in Korean, and before it was the Ministry of Trade, Muyok-song, and these partners are living in the situation that they are practically clueless about large parts of the work they do. For example, in the Ministry of Trade, basically they had the Reuters business service. They got this ticker in, and then they distributed news they saw to certain companies or to certain institutions where they thought they should know them, but they had no way to do any kind of deeper research. So to build up knowledge for them, gives them an empowerment, gives them also a certain form, really limited, of autonomy, a realm of autonomy, where they can say, we are the experts in this field, we are confident we can do these policies. And to give a recent example, we started last year, with online Zoom lectures with the North Koreans, and we started in the fields we work on, like sustainable forestry, and then they said, we got a request from our government, we have to devise a plan for green growth. I could have many speculations, because they never tell you a lot, which is one of the many reasons that's incorporating with them, why they have this. Probably because they think it's green and it's growth, so it must be good for our country, but they had no idea what to do. So we organized a lecture series, 5 until now, I think, 10 different presenters. One of them was here on green growth, and it was very helpful for them to draw up their own plan. They are in a situation which many governments here also, and many also researchers and scientists cannot really understand. So that is for us very important. While there is a real way, you could say it would be good to have more illicit information. When we bring in legally or open information or information they approve of, that's equally important. And just as a side note to that, since a long time in the work with the Ministry of Environment, we bring also South Korean information, and it mostly works. Meaning we had some publication which was very much coveted by our partners. They saw them when they were outside. And once we had to try 4 or 5 times to bring it in before it went in. And even then, we have to admit it, these things go in, and they are double checked then by a security agency. So that means we don't know which of the books sent the right. But in this one case I was thinking about was about forest inventory. We are very sure it arrived where it should arrive because they based their own handbook on forest inventory on the model they found here. And it's then the next point, who can read what we bring? Unfortunately, few people. First of all, because of the language barrier. Second of all, because simply not everybody is allowed to read foreign publications. So we made it a rule also to support internal publications. That's another very important point, to support North Koreans doing themselves their own publications. Now I'm coming to the point I love most, the frustrations with North Korea. They're so numerous. The big ones are for us that they are usually doing too few, too late in the fields where they could easily score some success. And I want just to relay one thing here or two. The one was a big project. There was a clean development mechanism project that was under the UNFCCC. The idea is you, for example, substitute dirty energy by clean energy. You can generate carbon credits, and these carbon credits you can sell in foreign markets, especially in the European carbon market. When they heard of it, they thought, oh, we have almost no industry, clean environment, so we must get a lot of dollars out of that. And then they researched, and we brought 2008 a consultant in who told them what it exactly means, the CDM project. They said we can never do that. There are so many requirements regarding the transparency of the project, we can't do it. But then it took 2 or 3 more years because the thing was quite attractive before finally, after 2 on-the-spot guidances by Kim Jong-un that time, they were allowed to do it. At that point, between 2008 and 10, we had carbon credits still in the beginning of the period, valued at around 20 euro in the European market per ton of certified emission reduction. When they finally finished, it's technically quite complicated to do these registrations. We helped them from the project design document to the end, auditing, monitoring, etc. And they finished 2012. The market crashed because the European market was so designed that it shouldn't hurt the European industry. There was too much grandfather and too many emissions emission right. So in the end, the emission right was only valued at 20 cents, which was too low even to cover the monitoring and auditing from an external audit company. So they had done something. It was basically went in the right direction, but they were too late. Had they started a few years earlier, they could have made it a real success. And similarly now with the Green Climate Fund, it took them so long to accept that the Green Climate Fund is out in South Korea, because they always said, how can we, every country has to write a letter there, an official letter to say we are interested in cooperating with you. And they always said, we cannot write a letter to Seoul, South Korea. It's impossible. So we said we cut out the address and bring it there. And it took them again too many years before they finally were one of the latest countries joining that, designating a national authority. And by that time, the easy way to participate in readiness programs or in full programs was already gone. Then everything became very much political. Another thing, but I want to talk about something else, which for me is the ground, maybe more important. On every trip, tremendous stress builds up. And the stress comes from around the clock surveillance, and stress comes from the many lies you hear, black and white often, on small things. Like we do a lot of research, bird monitoring there, so we bring scope and big lens cameras in, or pre-approved, and we go to one sun and we get beautiful rooms overlooking the bay, and it's really great. If you were a bird lover, you would know there's a number of really interesting species, and you can see them for kilometers. It's one of the absolute top spots where they move from the Wonsan Bay then to China later. And 10 minutes later, it knocks on our door. Oh, we found out we have to renovate these rooms. And that was 5 o'clock in the evening. We have to renovate this room. Sorry, we go to other rooms. They put us in another room because they found out that it was not good to have people with cameras and lenses there where all the different ships were. Some of them doing things what not doing typically. And these things, they know that they lie, and they know that we know they lie. So it's an absolutely frustrating situation. So usually on every trip, I have one time when I explode and get very angry and loud, and I see it as a kind of self-cleansing mechanism. Afterwards, drink a lot of beer. And now, maybe the last point in this round, number 9, which I find very important. What gets wrong? I think the one thing, because I'm thinking a lot about it, the idea that North Korea has a monolithic leadership. Clearly, that's one of the most cherished ideas they promote themselves, but it's not true. And the reason to work in the field of environment, one reason is that we have here agencies which are very much responsive to our cooperation and which are interested in peaceful integration or peaceful cooperation, which in other fields is not anymore given. It also educates the diplomats. We have a lot of diplomats in perfect German, never been in Germany. It's totally different than in other countries. They have no experience. So it's not only, let's say, the ideology that is the problem, but it's also the lack of statecraft which is the problem. And that one can be a little bit alleviated if we say we cooperate in peaceful manner. And that would be, in our case, we help them on the Roundtable Convention on Wetlands, the IUCN, International Union for the Conservation of Nature, and the East Asian Australasian Flyway Partnership, and finally also to register DNA with the Green Climate Fund and help them to visit UNFCCC every year. So that were points which were very important for us. The second one there also the motivation. Craig already touched upon that when he said it's different if you're coming from pariah state, it's not nice. And the motivation, the only motivation many governments see, either they want to gain hegemony on the Korean Peninsula, or they are simply looking for money. But it's not true, and that's a lesson we really took also from the Corona time, that we found out programs that we had supported before in North Korea were going on, though there was nobody anymore supporting them. And that was for us a very good lesson to see there is an intrinsic motivation which is different from these. And then on the whole, this idea, what I call naive isolation policy, I would isolate North Korea if I would know it's ending by that, if we say the bad thing. But it will not work as long as there's China, lower, much lesser extent Russia. North Korea will stay as it is. We have to work with North Korea as it is, not with North Korea as the agreement is. And whatever we do and whatever additional layer of sanction we put on, it will not go away from it. And the last one then, how can we work together with them under such circumstances? Only in one way. We need to accept them as partners, not as value partners. I always tell the South Korean person clearly, there's a huge difference among friends, value partners, and partners. But they are not only targets for how do you say that, subversion or so, but they are really partners we have to take serious. And our rule is then, for every program, it has to work for itself. So let's say we have an environmental program, it should make sense. The also make sense in supporting our overarching goals, more cooperation with South Korea, and by that, this much used, but not really achieved trust building between both sides. So that were my contributions, and now I hope we can come to a first round of either comments, maybe Ms. Stevens or the Boljkovac, or also from the audience or from the online participants.
I mean, I'll make a couple of comments. Firstly, I want to say it's really nice and refreshing to hear both of your opinions, and to hear because you don't usually, when people talk about cooperating with North Korea, actually they don't talk about cooperating with North Korea. As you just made the very salient point that you have to see North Koreans as partners, and they have to also know that you're treating them as partners. And I think a lot of the mistakes that the international community make is to not treat them like a legitimate partner that you are actually cooperating with. And North Korea is very susceptible to that. They are very sensitive to that kind of thing. And so once you start treating them, or once you're not treating them as a partner, then there is no cooperation that's going to get done. So yeah, a lot of the stuff that you both said actually, really rang true to me as well. And it was, yeah, it was very, very, very interesting to hear from both of you. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Yeah.
Thanks, Berhard, and thanks, Zoe, for that too. When you mentioned the monolithic dictatorship, which they, as Berhard said, leadership, we call it dictatorship in the West, that they're very proud of. I thought you were going to go down another path, actually. And this is one thing that I found incredibly refreshing, was I've done training for the UN in over 90 countries around the world. And everywhere, ministries compete against each other. They fight like cats and dogs sometimes, or they have a professional, if uneasy, relationship. Also in developed countries, my own country, Canada, Germany, they're always competing for limited resources. And at the end of the day, but also they feel their ministry is the best, and they're very enthusiastic about it. Going to Pyongyang to do my first training, I was completely shocked. The people in the room did not get along. They all knew each other, but most of them didn't even like each other, because they were so ultra competitive with one another. And that, to me, really shocked me, because you hear about this, you think, oh, everyone thinks the same, everyone acts the same. Absolute dribble, totally untrue. They have the same hopes, dreams, etc., but also they have a very similar professional civil service that operates in a competitive way. There are competitive aspects to this very socialist economy. On the other hand, I've been the only guest in a 300-room hotel, as well, with fully staffed. So there's economic things that make zero sense, but there's also a competitive nature in other areas that you least expect. So it's quite interesting about that. To me, that also got me off on a very good footing when I realized once you start working there, it's really not that different in many ways when you're presenting your work, etc. So just wanted to add that.
And to that, one more, they are also Koreans. I mean, often we ask ourselves, are they Koreans? Are there similarities? The one Korean thing is they are understanding the value of education and learning for their children as well as for themselves. So they are usually very grateful for that. And that it's not an easy thing, because for a long time, until the 1980s, it was always said, we don't need to learn from others, because we know already. And I said in one meeting, I still remember the so-called German-Korean friendship farm, which is not longer that, but in the past were the socialist friendship farm. And I was sitting in a meeting, one of my first times, and where I heard the farm director saying, we don't need teaching, we just need practice. That was very blunt and very, in my opinion, foolish to say, but most people are extremely grateful for learning, and often they say, can you bring me a book to about German language? And like, oh, you want to learn German? No, it's too late for me, but I want my daughter has a better opportunity, something like that. This is a direct quote from somebody there. So there are, these normal or well traits you find also elsewhere in the world or elsewhere in Korea, which is good to see. And that is what I said in the beginning. There is this realm of normalcy too in this sometimes very bizarre and difficult to understand country.
In fact, for me, I had been to North Korea 4 or 5 times before I ever set foot in South Korea, which I think is quite unusual for most people to experience. And when I got here, it was in 2010, maybe 2008, I was in a bit of shock, I have to say. Koreans are the same people, that's absolutely true, but the contrast of everything else is still mind-boggling. But I think we had a conference of 10,000, a labor conference, COEX, and I was just overwhelmed. Starbucks. So that was one interesting observation from my side too. It shocked me.
That's a thing which is also underscoring the value of the programs. I think of capacity building. We think maybe okay, it only reaches the leadership or reaches the elite, which is true. But think of that elite. I talk about now assistant we had, daughter of diplomats who had been in Sweden before. When I asked her what was the best experience in life, she said when I was 5 to 10 or so when she was in Sweden, I just could take my bicycle and go wherever I want in Stockholm. Now, we went with her to the East Street, to the West Street, to Kungansland. All points she had never seen in her life. So even if you are a member of the elite, you're basically a prisoner in your city there. It's not that the elite is running around in flashy cars and seeing everything and doing everything. They have the same limitations in their experience than the rest of the people. And that's why it's so important to bring the people out and to do also programs in the country with them. The same, let's say, for factory visits, that many factories, they didn't visit before they went with you probably, or in our field, it's the wetlands, the nature protected areas. None of our partners did go to any place like Raston, which they designated the Ramsar site, which means the wetland of international importance. They simply couldn't have done so, though they were in the elite, in the ministry which is responsible for it. And now we have intervention, please.
Hello, Berhard, nice to see you. Pleasure to see you again. Just want to say briefly. Yeah, so my name is Nathan Ritchie. I teach at the university here. International security. A little bit of a sideline of North Korea strategy related issues, so that's not to say my main focus. I want to say, first of all, thanks to everyone on the dais and online. Thanks to the technical staff and all the people who did in the work behind the scenes. Thanks to President Dictator for Life, Corinne Howell, for using his singular will and the strength of the Suryong to bring our conference to a stand this year. So I have 2 questions. The first of which is mostly a sort of question of curiosity, and I think probably Berhard and Zoe are perhaps the best placed to answer this. And then after that, I have a question that's I think somewhat more, at least from my perspective, somewhat more serious and important. And here I think perhaps Berhard and Greg are best placed to answer this, but if Zoe wants to give a shout out, then you're welcome to, of course. So my first question actually sort of piggybacks off of something that you finished with there, Berhard. When you were talking about the Pyongyang elites themselves being subject to many of the behavioral strictures that Otto in Pyongyang or in the other cities face, which to me really raises the question of for whom then, or let's say how then, is it used, these resort complexes like at Wonsan. or, you know, the ski resort, or, I don't know, the water park, or these things. I mean, if, you know, if the elite are also supposed to keep their head down and, you know, not supposed to be flashy, and I mean, for whom are these things established? Or put differently, like, how is it in theory that they're supposed to be managed? In terms of like who goes there and, you know, access. I mean, what's the purpose behind these things? That's the first question. And then the second one is, I get the impression from all three of you in some respects that although you've had difficulty in dealing with your interlocutors in North Korea, and things can be painfully slow. There are, you know, misrepresentations perhaps from them, or we might not just flatly call them lies. Yeah, at the end of the day, I get the impression that North Koreans want to cooperate with you. And, you know, my focus on North Korea, to the extent that I have one, you know, is more when, foreign policy, diplomacy, defense strategy, and in that realm, the prevailing logic at the moment is that North Korea doesn't want to talk. They're not interested in talking. They're not interested in talking to the U.S. about, frankly speaking, even sanctions. Really, I mean, they're just not interested in anything talking at all right now. And partly that might be COVID, partly that might be that, you know, perhaps their own internal issues, partly that might be because, you know, they're trying to build up their relationship with Russia and China. I mean, I'm kind of speculating, but is that fair to say that in your realm, they're eager to cooperate and, you know, in the realm that I'm talking about, they're not? Or do you think that there was a chance in which perhaps many of the cooperative endeavors that you have had the privilege of working with were the exception rather than the rule, and that perhaps when North Korea lifts its, you know, COVID restrictions on face-to-face contact with you know, with the outside world, that it's going to be much harder for you to engage in the types of activities that you were engaging in before, perhaps because the geopolitical situation has changed so much over the last, let's say, 18 months to 3 years.
Thank you. Two very excellent questions. And Stephen, do you want to start with the first one?
Sure thing. Yeah, I'll start with the first one, and then I'll make a couple of comments for the second one, but you guys can definitely take over for that. But so the first question was about who travels to these luxurious places, right? And I think I wanted to make a comment on the mention of the elite before as well, because I think it's important to realize that there's the elite class and then there's the elite, right? There's people that live in Pyongyang and they have a little bit more money, you know, we're not talking super flashy, but they, you know, do have certain privileges. They live in Pyongyang, and that in itself is a privilege. And then there's the elite, right? And they are the ones that work in the government, or they, you know, are close with Kim Jong-un himself, or they, you know, are party members and stuff like that. I think it's there is a bit of a distinction between people who live in Pyongyang and then really elite North Koreans. But these places are being used. So you've got the Wonsan Kalma resort that hasn't opened yet. There was a hot spring resort nearby that actually was just finished and just opened in, I think, January 2020. So I doubt that that's had much use. The ski resort, I can tell you, was definitely being used in January 2020 when I last visited. And I think, I mean, there is a difference between not being flashy and not showing off and, you know, being very capitalist about things, but still enjoying what your government provides for you. So these places have been built up. The ski resort was built up by Kim Jong-un, who did, I think he went through a lot of different things at that time. And it's a place provided for the people by the government. So these places are very cheap to visit in relation to us going to a ski resort. If you visit as a foreigner, it's going to be more expensive because it's not built for you as a foreigner. So that's where these places make a lot more of their money. You know, further away places, for example, Kumgangsan, they will be visited by more local people. So local people that live near in the area, just because it's so tricky to get around North Korea. Even as foreigners, when you see the state of the roads and stuff like that, it's very tricky. But I know that a lot of people in Pyongyang do like to visit Wonsan and also Nampo, which is only about an hour or two away from the capital. So these places, yeah, they are being used, but it's not in terms of the kind of luxury travel that we might know in the West. And for your second question as well, I just wanted to mention that when you're comparing these two, this cooperation and then this lack of cooperation, it's important to divide this into, you're talking about the North Korean government, and then you're talking about the North Korean people. And I think the North Korean people are all very willing to cooperate, or all wanting some kind of change, something to happen. Certainly in the tourism industry, I know, even though I haven't spoken to them in, you know, the past 2.5 years, I know that they would all be incredibly eager to get back into the tourism industry and to cooperate. Maybe it will, of course, the tourism industry will be affected when and if we can go back because of COVID restrictions. I can imagine it being incredibly strict, but I don't think that the geopolitical climate will affect tourism. It's been worse in the past, and tourism, you know, has kind of been unaffected generally. Obviously, there are travel bans and stuff like that. There's been the US travel ban on US citizens, but that's from the US side. So yeah, I think there's a difference for me between the government and the lack of cooperation there on that level, and then the local people on that level. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I want to add some points. The first one, there's really a big difference of how you understand elite, but also how you understand youth. For example, the water park, Mutsu water park, also the shooting range, this riding place, steering, and all these things which are in Pyongyang, they are rather well used. The water park sometimes with large groups, usually not on individual basis, but on group basis, with school classes going, or government entities, or so on. The ski resort is partly used, I would say. If you look from a market economy point of view, they never had a real season. The season meaning where every day you have 10,000 or 15,000 people coming and doing their skiing there, so that it pays off, because you have these huge costs. I mean, it's really huge cost of energy, of personnel you have there, but it doesn't play a role. They never were thought for making money or so in that sense. Maybe Kalmar, because it's more focused on foreign. So these results, we can very well argue that they are not at all profitable, and not at all, even their white elephants, they are standing there around, they have more really propaganda value or prestige value than any real value. And the groups which are there, even on full days, they're rather tiny. It's nothing to compare with resorts in other countries. And to the second question, I think it's, again, first of all, the distinction between a monolithic and non-monolithic state. We have agencies which are more interested in cooperation and environment. They are all enthusiastic. Second of all, there's simply not enough counterparts from the West. If more organizations would not focus only on this human rights nuclear issue, but would say, okay, we try to engage them in other issues. I'm very sure there would be other fields where they could be engaged as well. But now comes the third point to my own work and theory. How long is that replicable? The problem is, if there would be really hundreds of organizations saying we want to work with North Korea, we offer training, we use North Korea would definitely hit the brake, because clearly there is this subversive moment of bringing in information, bringing people out. It is a thing they can only tolerate in our projects because it's still very controlled and limited. And let's say what I would hope for is to find a kind of boundary to say we have to extend this boundary and to extend the training so we get more people in, more people out, especially scholarship students, study trips, to an extent where they still accept it. There would come a point, and we had this point also, when they said, no, we cannot do this or that, it's too much. It will happen also because their capacity is very limited. Like in the Ministry of Environment, there's basically one department and a handful of persons who have the authority to deal with foreigners. And it's always the same people then. And now, in our case, now to talk a little bit from our foundation perspective, there are already 3 foundations, German foundations, and we were the first for a long time working with them. And then they said, it worked so well, okay, the other foundations also should work with Ministry of Environment, because it's so easy. We know how it works, we know how to control them there in a way, or to have them there, which we don't like, which is actually against usually our principles. But what can you do in a country like North Korea?
If I may, that issue, North Korean colleagues that I work with have, I would say, too much respect for the UN. They honestly feel the UN sticks to its principles of promoting peace, promoting cooperation, and you really feel this sort of old-fashioned perspective from their side. At least for our areas where we have ongoing cooperation all the time. And they very earnestly feel that the UN is making a huge difference. They have a hell of a lot of respect for the UN, a lot more than most Americans do, for example. I look at under certain administrations, and certainly more than many Canadians do as a Canadian. But at the same time, they're very frustrated as well. When Trump and Kim Jong-un thawed relations in 2018, Berhard just reminded me now, I deal with the UN mission of DPRK in Geneva. There's 8 professional diplomats, full-time, assigned there from Pyongyang. They were completely overwhelmed with requests from UN agencies, NGOs, and other organizations for travel, trips to start cooperation. I had organizations calling me because they actually said, "Go talk to Fred. We have that time. Fred knows how to work with us, and nobody's paying me to do that." So when you talk about capacity, absolutely. Now, normally, the ambassador is kind of a little bit bored, and he doesn't have that much to do except when Human Rights Council is on, or the Conference on Disarmament, etc. Then they get busy in short spurts. But normally they're just sort of ignored in the system. They cover meetings, they're very professional, they know what they're doing, but at the end of the day, and they want to cooperate. But yeah, this definitely, we would see the brakes be put on. I think during the Sunshine era here too, there you could see those capacity constraints. One other thing, this is sort of a very personal aside, I mentioned it the other day. A colleague of mine from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs is Boljkovac. And I knew him and his wife. They were based in Paris, actually, for several years in mission there, this mission to UNESCO, DPRK and relations with France. And his understudy, who's now the environment attaché in Geneva, he was very, very close to him. And I met him 15 years ago or so when he was the understudy under this guy in Paris. And so now he's in Geneva, and I asked him the other day, last year, I guess, when we started meeting again after the isolation period of the pandemic. And I said, I know that this person got remarried 3 years later after his wife passed away. Did you go to the wedding? He said, Craig, we're not allowed to socialize with anyone from our work unit outside of the office. He said, we're friends, we work together. When you come, they assign several of us to take care of you, and we go out drinking and eating after our training, etc. And they know, I can tell, they know each other well, they're very close colleagues. But he said, for personal things like that, it's absolutely not allowed. This is the level of control that the regime has on those individuals. So if we ever talk about there being cracks in the armor of the security apparatus, etc. The ability to control it is absolutely phenomenal. If they're with me, they can't plot against the state. If they're in the hotel with me, there's microphones clearly. They can't plot with each other, and certainly in the workplace, they're very closely monitored and controlled. But anything outside of a controlled setting, I think it's just impossible. So, sorry, I didn't fully adequately answer your question. One last thing though, the Massacron ski resort, I was skiing quite often in China before the pandemic, and I realized something hit me when I was skiing in China once, is that, and also the water, the bathing suits are provided. People don't have their own bathing suits. I saw this trolley of 1,000 bathing suits going by me when we were at the bar at the water park once. And same for the ski resort. Canadians, we have our ski stuff, we throw it in the car, we go. It just doesn't work like that there. But because I work at Tsinghua University, I'm actually part of what's called a work unit, which is a communist worker cell. It's an organization. And my work unit goes on retreats occasionally. And I'm not a socialist, they just put me in this work unit because I work there. And that's what they do, and I understand in DPRK is that they give passes for the ski resort. It's maybe a once in a lifetime trip for someone from industrial park in Canton, and they can go try skiing, etc. Or to go to Pyongyang, go to the water park, because the access to Pyongyang is very restricted. But nevertheless, within Pyongyang too, like you said. So I don't think these things are purely for the elite, and you certainly don't see the elite throwing their skis in the car and going one side. No way. Absolutely out of the question.
So just wondering, if you're I understand your distinction between elite and elite.
Yeah.
But if you're, I don't know, somewhere in that mix between elite and elite,
yeah.
On a Saturday afternoon, if you have a vehicle, can you get in the car and just leave to drive the
They don't have vehicles. Even my level contact is one of the 11 vice ministers of foreign affairs. He does not have his own vehicle.
No, it's basically there's no private vehicles beside the ones in the immediate entourage of the leader, because they give them as present to them for the very high ranking. And you have a lot of people who have a certain access to cars which don't belong to them. So if you are in a military unit or also in the ministry, the ministry is already much restricted. And we had always these cases after 6 o'clock in the evening when the curfew set in. They say, Mr. Lear, you have to go in the car someplace. Then I go with them, because with me they can go, but without me, even 6 o'clock in the evening, after 6 o'clock, they cannot just go by car to pick up some stuff. They need for the next day's seminar, so they need to put a foreigner in. If not, they cannot use that car. And these are also up to Director General level of the ministry. So it's really, that is important to understand, that the level of private life or the control or restrictions are really tremendous in the way we sometimes forget, because we are so used to it.
Yeah.
Hi, thank you very much for your presentation. It's very insightful. My name is Jesus Proxy. I'm pleased you can start with climate change and work with construction organizations, possibly when we power this late. I mostly work with Northern Africa and Eastern countries. I actually don't know anything about the environment, so it's extremely interesting to listen to the discussion. I have just some very basic questions, but I was wondering, you were mentioning, for example, the Green Fund, North Korea as a leading project in them. I think when it comes to capacity building or projects, should be also easy to access more finance. When it comes to actually real projects, material projects, infrastructural projects, then there are many due diligence, safeguards, many things to do. I was wondering also, like, not only how can basically North Korea compare to the diligence, because that's I really wonder how can North Korea to diligence on international standards. But also was wondering, there's an entities that want to invest in North Korea. Don't they face like huge operational risk, mostly because of the legal risk? So how can you de-risk investments for Korea if there is any way to do that? And then my second question was just curiosity. I was wondering how is the climate change discussing in Korea, both by, let's say, in official communication, but also how you discuss it. Is it like, is it an ideological one? Is it something that Western countries need against their developing countries? Or is it something that maybe they don't really believe in, or is it an opportunity to get funding? What is it for them? Yeah.
Thank you very much. Also, really great question. And I want to start because we were involved in the CPF process, let's say. The thing was that in North Korea, as you said, there was infighting in that time between the powerful Minister of Agriculture and the much less powerful Minister of Environment. And the Minister of Agriculture wanted to be the focal point. But DPRK said, no, that doesn't make sense. It has to be the Minister of Environment. And so they found I would call it foul compromise. I hope nobody of FAO listening now. They said, okay, it's done by the Minister of Environment, but the work goes through FAO, which is the contact of the Ministry of Agriculture. And so they had one readiness project started, but it was so heavy on overheads and on equipment, that office equipment, etc., that finally it was not approved. We were working, we are not an accredited entity, it takes too long time, but we were working with IUCN as one of our partners there, and we have ready a landscape restoration abroad project for the country. We hope we can do it as a readiness project soon when it comes up, but for now there's none ongoing, I think. And on the climate change, you also work on that. And we have a lot of work done on that. I just want to mention one interesting observation. They don't blame it on others so much, but what they do. And, you know, they have the Workers' Party newspaper, 6 pages, 4 pages pieces of the leader, 1.5 pages on domestic issues, other pieces for the leader, and then a very half page on international issues. There you often find, because of climate change, we have a drought in this country. We have hunger in that country. And we have flooding in that country. And I think partly it's also a kind of scapegoating process, because they themselves have a lot of problems from climate change, admittedly. The whole Korean Peninsula seems to be quite affected by the rising temperature level. But at the same time, there's a lot of microclimate problems and more arguably, maybe they cut down half of their trees, or to an extent that they are not usable anymore. Then with the monsoon rain, problems set in. So it's for them in a way also to say, okay, look, other countries have the same problem. It's due to something unavoidable in international climate change. Having said that, it's one of the very few issues we are quite actively working, and one of the last major publications of them was the voluntary review. It was 2020 or 2021 on climate change. It was a very interesting document, clearly with North Korean typical limitations, but they did it, and it was a major outcome. Maybe you want to add something?
No, I totally agree with what you're saying, Berhard. But one thing that struck me my first time I went to DPRK was, this is a climate change campaigner's dream. There's almost no cars on the road. Everyone walks. In Pyongyang, they don't use bicycles because apparently didn't like the look of bicycles. Bad enough, but they're slowly since his death. But they use bicycles in the countryside. Yes. So in a way, they're pre-set up for totally different reasons, economic reasons, to tackle climate change quite effectively. On the other hand, too, yes, I think they're acutely aware of the problems of climate change, and the infrastructure is tremendously weak in the country for transportation, etc. There's no doubt about it. So if the smallest thing goes wrong and you have long delays, etc., it's really important. But and at the end of the day, they do scapegoat, use it for scapegoating a lot. But on the other hand, I feel a true commitment. At COP27 last week, I had the honor of proofreading the intervention of DPRK before they gave it. They said, "Craig, can you just check the English?" And so I got 5 minutes before they gave it, so I didn't much time, but I was really happily surprised. I said to you, Berhard, right away too. I was really happily surprised with the commitments and the connection to green growth. They get it. They understand. They know where they want to go, and they know they have a lot of room to develop. And I truly think that they'll try to develop not in the Chinese way. I'm not China, but one senior official said you can't choose your neighbors. They don't like the way China's developed in many ways, for security reasons, for reasons of opening up too much. But on the other hand, too, they feel China overdeveloped too fast and too heavily with it, and I think they want a lighter method of development.
And they do also embrace these SDGs, which I always was not a fan of them because I thought they are so weak and so wide and encompassing. But for North Korea, it became a really good instance for us because usually with one ministry, you are very much restricted in what you do. If you have a project only to, let's say, only forestry, only birds, only environmental or energy, but with these SDGs, suddenly we have the possibility almost to come to comprehensive projects with our partners, because we can say to the model, okay, we want to work on SDGs in this or that area. Let's say we have the protected area like Moondog, the West Coast, and we can then say we do a number of different projects under the heading SDG, because the ministry is somehow related to that, or it's part of their brief now, so that became very helpful. Yeah, then we have one more question. Please, sorry, come.
Thank you very much for all three presentations. I think this was a really unique opportunity to hear about these practical experiences, especially kind of civil.
Introduce yourself.
Yes, my name's Chloe and I'm a PhD student at EY. My question is actually about the SDGs, because reading the most recent report from DPRK on the SDGs and its progress and challenges, I really noticed such a stark difference between points where they were absolutely not willing to admit any problems. For example, suicide, there is apparently no suicide in DPRK, there is no domestic violence. And then areas where I was, quite surprised that they were actually quite open about some of the challenges. I don't know if the data they provided is accurate. That's not something I can comment on. But I wanted to ask you, in your experience with the work that you're doing, how easy is it for you to identify areas which are going to be just too sensitive, where there's just going to be the door will be closed? And how much are you able to identify areas where there is room for cooperation?
Thank you very much. Stevens, do you want to say something? Because I think that also touched upon your work a lot.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, we come across that a lot of the time. Where is the line? Where can you get past that line where it's not even worth drawing? And I think for me and in the tourism industry, it's almost about overstepping that line. And the Koreans make it very clear. You could be talking and laughing 1 minute and then you say one thing too far, or you try and push them one step too far, and then all of a sudden they're completely closed off, and it's almost a physical closing off of their bodies. They almost don't want to talk to you anymore, and could be very uncomfortable, and to the point that you might want to then leave the situation for a bit and then go back and talk to them and say, either address the situation and apologize, or just kind of leave it, if sometimes they kind of prefer to just pretend that things didn't happen, and from there you kind of get a feel of where you can overstep the mark or where you can push them on certain things and not. At least that's how it's worked in my experience.
Thank you for the question. That's a great question as well. Thanks. I spent many years, my first visits going to DPRK, seeing almost like a Potemkin village style sites, etc., even in the industrial realm. So we go to a model factory and everything was clean and perfect. And you scratch your head and wonder if things were actually being produced there. Then finally, I felt I built up enough trust over the years. I had this deputy or vice minister came to even for some meeting, and we met. And I said, look, I'm bringing a delegation from Norway and China next month. They're not going to be interested in seeing a perfect factory. If you want assistance from the outside world, show us, you know me. We're not going to use photographs for propaganda against your government. We're discreet. You've known me many, many years. Take us to your worst examples. We want to see the true conditions of chemical manufacturing in DPRK. And wow, I have been to chemical production facilities and hazardous waste management facilities all around the world, in Africa, in Asia, in South America. I have never seen conditions like I saw on my next visit. The Ministry of Chemical Industry was our co-host with Foreign Affairs, and we went to Suncheon. It's the #2 chemical complex. In the old Soviet times, everything is put in one place, and so you have this whole chemicals town, 125 kilometers north of Pyongyang. And as we were driving there, the Ministry official kept turning to me and said, Craig, can we go back to Pyongyang? Craig, can we go back to that? Every 10 minutes I finally said, it's like children in the back of the car saying, are we there yet? But in the office, we got there. They were just collapsed roofs of factories as far as the eye could see. Maybe 5% of the chemical complex was under production. The rest was just like it had been carpet bombed during the Korean War and left to rot. It was stunning. And the conditions, there was a nice reception area where a woman in a handbag greets you, and they had a 3D map of this huge, the size of this room of the complex. And then we walked out, and there was hexachlorobenzene was one of the chemicals under the Stockholm Convention that only North Korea still produces in the world. So they took us to that facility. It was a 2-story complex with huge smokestacks coming out at the top. The smokestacks had nothing coming out, but the second floor windows were all blown out. And it's like the house was like a house on fire. There was this acrid, thick, acidic smoke coming out of every single space. And my Chinese colleagues, who are pretty used to pretty dastardly conditions in these factories, refused to go in. But my colleague, the Director General of the Ministry of Chemical Industry, she grabbed my arm and took me inside, no mask on it. I was dying, but I had never seen anything like it in my life. There were at least 100 workers inside with no protective equipment. And there were literally chemical cauldrons with smoky fires underneath them that were where the chemicals were getting up to a certain temperature, the reactions were taking place to produce. They were literally medieval conditions, absolutely medieval. And the most horrible part of it all was the workers' housing shared the walls of the factory. And it was a Wednesday afternoon, I'll never forget, there's little children playing in multicolored puddles of who knows what outside the factory. One kid just had a diaper on and was stomping around barefoot, which is very un-Korean, I think, as well for both Koreas. So I said, the Norwegian came to me, he was the Director General of the Ministry of Environment. He was very senior, he was about to retire. I said, if there's one thing we do, okay, yes, we can't ship chemical equipment to replace the production of hexachlorobenzene because we potentially dual use and there's security issues. But can we have a project to move the housing a few hundred meters away and build them nice, safe homes down upwind from, generally from the factory? And we went back and for 3 years, we tried to get that project. So this is where the answer to the question again about what organizations don't do right. Why can't we just help them build it? They're good at building it themselves. We just give them a little push and resources. They would have happily and gladly had that kind of cooperation.
Thank you very much. I wouldn't say on this upstream note, but on this really important note, I think we can end this debate. Unfortunately, it was really very interesting. I enjoyed it very, very much. Stephen, thank you so much for joining us here, Greg, the audience also with great questions. I enjoyed it a lot. Yeah, and I think we could naturally not cover the questions all in depth and did not to speak of finding solutions to them, but we hope we gave you some food for thought. And on this note, yeah, let's end and see that we go further on with the project. I think people are invited to dinner here. I guess you know that. Dinner is sponsored by Hans Seidel Foundation. I have to say that too. That's a good point. Accompany that.